Exacto here for the next deck in our A to Z Riftbound Challenge series. So we finished up our series on Darius, so that means going in alphabetical order. Our next legend to try out is none other than Diana. Diana, Scorn of the Moon. Now, as always, let's start things off by taking a look at the legend here and kind of seeing if we can gather from the legend card what kind of deck Diana is going to want to play. So she is of the blue and purple mind and chaos domains, and her legend ability says at reaction speed, tap the legend to add 1 energy. Spend this energy only during showdowns. So we have seen that this type of effect is very powerful. In fact, we just finished with something similar with the Darius deck. Now, Darius, in order to add his energy for the turn, needed to have the condition that you were playing your second card for the turn. Diana's a little bit easier to get that bonus energy. She just has to be involved in showdowns. And that energy can be used to play all types of nasty tricks and spells that she will use to win showdowns, win that combat on her battlefields. And so let's take a look now at the champion units you can have with this deck. We'll start off with the purple one because it's the less popular one. The purple one says for 4 energy and 1 purple power, you get a 3 might unit. Diana, no longer human. You can play her at ambush speed, and when you play a spell, she gets +2 for a turn. That's a pretty powerful effect. And it does give us another clue as to how Diana wants to play out her games, play spells. Now, that is not the unit that is most popularly chosen as the champion unit. Instead, people play this one, Diana Lunari. For 3 energy, you get a 3 might unit that says when a showdown begins here, you may pay 1 energy. If you do, predict, then reveal the top card of your main deck. If it's a spell, draw it. Being a 3 energy costed champion, they play this because this always means you will have a turn 2 play or a turn 1 play, depending on whether you are playing first or drawing first. This will give you something to guaranteed put on the battlefield to have some type of early game, and her ability, when she moves into a showdown, you can use your Diana Lunari legend to get that energy to draw a card a pretty substantially decent amount of time. Because as we'll see in the deck list that we're using, she does run a lot of spells. So what is some of the spells she can use? Well, let's take a look at her signature spell, Moonfall. Very powerful. For 3 energy and 1 power of the blue or purple variety, an action speed spell that says choose a battlefield where you have units. You may move up to 1 enemy unit to that battlefield, then give all enemy units their -2 might this turn. Now, I want to correct the record here. I've been calling Diana a control deck in my previous videos. I want to kind of correct the record on that. She's not exactly a control deck because she does play a lot of units, and the way she wins games is through those units in combated battlefields. Now, she is a mid-range deck that wants to play towards the mid to late game, as we will see with some of these card choices, and one of the ways those decks can fall behind in point tempo and end up losing games is if an opponent plays a very aggressive deck that puts a lot of units out very quickly and makes it hard to push people off battlefields while they continue to just play more units than the mid-range deck has spells to deal with. Something like Moonfall really helps it with that weakness because you take a battlefield where an opponent may have multiple units stacked up, and with one spell, you shrink everyone in one fell swoop. We've seen in our games how effective something like Thousand Tail Watcher can be, giving everything -3. Well, this can move a unit to a different battlefield and then give everything there -2 might, letting you win combat easier. You don't even have to move something if there's nothing there. You can just move your unit in and say, I play Moonfall, all of your things are smaller. It is a very, very powerful signature spell. So it's no surprise that you have a combination of a good legend, a good champion, and a good signature spell, you have the makings of a pretty powerful meta deck in our Riftbound game. And we will see as we take a look at the metadata. I'm still using metadata from the Unleashed set simply because the Vendetta has been out for a while, but there's not a lot of tournament finishes at the time I'm recording this video. So the Unleashed data is pretty substantial here, and you can see that third from the top, there she is, Diana, Scorn of the Moon. She is absolutely a tier 1 deck, considered a meta deck. Very powerful. The combination does indeed lead to the combination of good legend, good champion, good signature spell does in fact lead to a good deck as a whole. So let's take a look at the deck we were playing. Now, normally I like to find tournament decks that are good examples of where we can be as a starting point for what we use for our A to Z series here. Like I said, Vendetta is still pretty new at the time of this video, so there's not like an established list for this is what Diana looks like in Vendetta. But we have the previous Unleashed meta decks as well as some new cards that people are trying out in the Diana list. So let's take a look. We already talked about the Legend. We talked about our champion, Diana Lunari. So let's take a look at the other units in this deck. Our beginning game, we have 8 2-drops. Ravenbloom Student is an ideal start to a game. 2 cost, 2 power unit that says when you play a spell, I get a little bigger. I get +1 might for the turn. Complemented as well for the 2-drop slot with Traveling Merchant. Pretty standard 2-drop inclusion in purple decks. When it moves, discard 1, then draw 1. It gets you some card filtering ability to find those impactful spells that you may need to progress into the late game and end game. We also play 3 copies of Tide Turner, and the movement through Tide Turner is going to really help us out with a unit that I will be mentioning in a minute. But first, let's talk about Fizz. Most people know what Fizz does. He comes down and he lets you recur a spell. Pretty much all the spells, I believe all the spells Diana plays in this list, at least in the main board, cost 3 or less. So if you're doing something like using a powerful Moonfall spell in the early game, you can play Fizz later on to potentially recur that spell, use it again, and then blow up an opponent's battlefield that they may have again stacked up units to hold in the mid to late game. Really nice. A new card from Vendetta that I am interested to try out in this list is Applied Researchers. For 4 energy, you get a 4 might unit that has the Empower ability. Empower is a new card mechanic from Vendetta. It says for an extra cost, in this case 3 energy, you may empower this, and when it is empowered, your spells cost 1 and a power less to a minimum of 1. Some veteran players of Riftbound may remember a card called Vex Cheerless. That is a Vex unit that says when it's on the battlefield, it discounts your own spells by 1 and a power, and it makes your opponents conversely cost more by 1 and a power. The stipulation being that it has to be on a battlefield for that discount tax to take effect. This one provides the discount, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on a battlefield for it to take effect, provided you invest a little bit more energy into it to unlock that ability. I'm very interested to see, is this worth a slot? Is discounting all my spells going to be worth a 7 energy investment in a unit? We'll see. They continue to play powerful, versatile purple options like Vex Apathetic. We know what Vex does for 4. You get a 4 might unit that has the deflect ability and says when an opponent plays a unit while I'm at a battlefield, stun it, and it can't move this turn. Shuts down Ambush, shuts down Accelerate, is pretty versatile, combating a variety of decks, as we have seen. Now, the star unit, though, and this is why I wanted to talk a little bit about Tide Turner later, the star unit of this deck is Hwei, Brooding Painter. He really pushes Diana to, I think, the top tier, that status that it is. For 5 and a blue power, you get a 5 might unit that says when I move, draw 1 and discard 1. Then, depending on the discarded card's type, you get a bonus effect. If you discard a spell, you get to draw an extra card. If you discard a gear, ready up to 2 runes. If you discard a unit, Hwei gets big. It's +3 might. So the idea is you move Hwei and kind of treat him, for those familiar with green decks, like a Stellacorn herder. He's going to draw, he's going to filter, he's going to help you find cards that you need to continue to and get rid of cards you don't need to continue to progress your game plan. You combine him with Tide, you move him into a battlefield, discard a unit, he takes that battlefield, assumedly, and then you can play something like Tide Turner at base to move him back to base, maybe discard a spell and get an extra draw. He draws a ton of cards, and I cannot tell you the amount of times I have been playing against a Diana player, both online and in paper, where Hwei just absolutely takes over a game. So I'm interested to be on the playing side of the equation this turn and get some cool movement stuff with Hwei on. I want to turn with Hwei. I want to be the one drawing cards and taking battlefields. The deck plays, as you can see, a big variety of spells as well. Diana, and I'll mention the spell suite in a minute, but this list, let's go over first. Acceptable losses, a little bit of main deck gear hate. There's enough gear going around still in the meta that something like acceptable losses, where each player kills one of their gear, worth at least 1 slot. Gust. Gust returns a unit at a battlefield with 3 might or less to its owner's hand. Again, like I said, one of the ways Diana and mid-range decks fall behind is if the opponent gets on the board quickly and often, and something like Gust can be played on the opponent's turn. If they move their small unit in, we tap. The showdown begins, unlocking Diana Legend's ability to tap, use a Gust, and return that unit back to its owner's hands. Similarly, we can do something like Stack Deck as well with the same equation, where the opponent moves in, unlocks our Diana's ability to look at the top 3 cards for 1 energy, look at the top 3 cards and put 1 into our hand. It is a really powerful card, and of course the deck plays 3 of them. Now, keeping with the theme of spells that draw cards and get incremental value, Stupefy. Stupefy is a 3 of in blue decks for as far back as I can remember. Give a unit -1 at reaction speed and draw a card. Hey, more ways to find our Hweis and impactful spells. It plays 1 copy of Flash. When you play your Hwei, you're going to want to treat it like a protect the king type strategy. You don't want the opponent to kill your Hwei when you're not using him to gain incremental value. So one of the ways you can, prevent accidental Hwei loss will be to play something like Flash to return him to base safely if he ever gets in a dangerous situation. It's playing 2 copies of Hard Bargain, a counter spell that can tax an opponent playing something expensive, or even the pump decks, the orange decks that keep one rune up for punch first. Hard Bargain's a nice punish to that. Then we play the star of the show. If Hwei is the star, then this spell is the co-star, Ride the Wind. This is how you want to play Hwei. You want to move him in, take a battlefield, pumping him up to 8 by discarding a unit you don't need anymore. And you want to play Ride the Wind, have him go over to that other battlefield and ready up, get another movement trigger, make him bigger if needed, draw an extra card if needed, and then move him back to base safely. Get 3 moves in 1 turn for 1 spell. That's how you want to abuse Hwei. This is the co-star to him. Then it plays a pair of I'll be honest, I didn't know which one was better, Smokescreen or Eclipse. They both do similar things, give a unit -4 might this turn. Smokescreen has the additional clause, it can go to a minimum of 1. It costs a little bit cheaper, but both of these cards shrink the enemy and help you take battlefields a little bit easier. 3 Moonfalls. Talked about it at the beginning. You're playing 3 of the signature spell, where we want to shrink everything at the battlefield, maybe take something off that they thought was safe, move it over to a place where it's not so safe anymore, and then take the battlefield that way. And then we're playing two Star-Crossed and one Wind and Ghost. Wind and Ghost is a new spell from Vendetta. Action speed for the same cost as Starfall. You choose a unit at a battlefield. If it has 3 or less, banish it, you exile it. Otherwise, you bounce it back to their hand. And the other one is something like Star-Crossed, where we know any unit on the battlefield, bounce one of your own things back to your hand. Maybe you want to bounce something like Tide Turner back to your hand. Maybe you want to bounce something like Fizz back to your hand so you can reuse his Enter the Battlefield ability. We have units that benefit from being bounced and replayed. Maybe the opponent isn't in such a fortunate situation as that. The battle. Okay, so I did want to say about the selection of spells. Diana is one of those decks, and this is exemplified perfectly by Alan ZQ, who, those of you who don't know, Alan ZQ is the best player in the world at Riftbound, and he played Diana in the last set. He played Ezreal before that. He is the master of blue-purple decks, and what players like him are able to do is, if they put in the work, most importantly, that they're talented in their own right, but they put in a lot of work practicing and refining these decks, because where champions are made is in the minute choices of spell selection. They get used to meta, they get used to what their decks are good and not so good against, and they make slight changes in the spell or card selections that they put for a tournament. And Diana is one of those decks where those choices really matter. So as far as a set stock list of spells, there isn't really something set with that, because most tournament lists refine their lists slightly to what they expect to play. I think this is a good starting list for spells, but of course, what do I know? I'm just a guy trying this out for the first time. If you have different spell selection, I would love to hear about it. If you have reasoning for different spells you chose, please drop me a comment and let me know. I love learning about this game as I make these videos. But let's move on. We'll talk about the battlefields. The first battlefield, and this, to my knowledge, is this is the blind choice for the Game 1 battlefield, Ravenbloom Conservatory. When you defend here, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a spell, put it into your hand, otherwise recycle it. We've already established with our Diana Lunari Legend that the top of our deck contains spells a decent amount of time. So if we have something there at the start of the game, if we're fortunate enough to go first, we put a unit there and defend on the opponent's crackback, we might draw a card a decent amount of time. So it's a good battlefield to take advantage of, that we use when maybe someone else is playing a deck that is not as spell heavy as we are. When you are drawing, they say when you're on the draw with Diana, let's say, they say play Abandoned Hall. This battlefield has caused so much discussion when it comes to Irelia and Diana. They abuse the crap out of this battlefield. When a player plays a spell, they may give a unit they control here +1. When you combine it with things like Ravenbloom Student, who gets bigger with spells, Hwei, who gets bigger on the move depending on what you discard, you can play something like a Stupefy. Give the opponent's unit -1. Your Ravenbloom gets +1 from the spell, and then he gets +1 from the battlefield. So all of a sudden, you're playing an Irelia deck where for 1 energy, you have a 3-point swing. Very powerful. And then when you're going first, a neutral battlefield. I might be incorrect in this battlefield choice, but Zon Warrens gives us more card filtering when we go first and helps us find our Hwei, our Ride the Wind, our impactful spells that we want to have in the mid to late game. Even split of runes, 6 and 6. Real quickly, the sideboard, we're playing an extra copy of Vex Apathetic for those cards, for those decks, I should say, that are relying on Ambush or Accelerate. We're playing a copy of Vex Cheerless. This is used against opponents that want to use spells to impact the game. Diana, Irelia, maybe even something like Kaisa. You put Vex on the battlefield, and all of a sudden they're cheap impactful spells are a little bit more expensive, and ours are a little cheaper. Um, Singularity, useful for removing, useful removal for large things. Another copy of Starcross as well if you're playing against an Aurora deck or something else that has a big amount of investment into one unit. When you Starcross it, it really sets them back in tempo. And speaking of Aurora, they're playing 2 copies of Turn to Dust to deal with the gear as it's played, and then the the sideboard continues with a copy of Abandoned. We saw an answer if we invest a lot into one unit, but if they invest a lot into one spell, Abandon's a nice answer to set them back on tempo. Decree of Insight. Now, this is part of a new cycle of cards in the Vendetta set where it's a targeted hate spells against certain colors. This one is for the orange decks. When you're playing against a big orange deck that wants to play big beefy units, something like Decree of Insight here drinks those orange units for a very small investment. And my personal excitement, this is what I'm most excited to play. Baron Nashor in the sideboard. Huge unit, 10 energy, 3 purple power for a 12 might unit that when he comes in, he brings his own battlefield. He brings a 3rd battlefield to the game. And he says he can't be chosen by enemy spells and abilities. Other friendly units get +2. So if you combine Baron playing, he plays his own battlefield. He gets a point for playing and taking that battlefield at the start. If you already have something like Hwei ready to move to the other 2, ready to holding 1 and ready to move to the other, you could conceivably go at the start of a turn from 5 all the way to winning a game with a Baron Nashor play. That's kind of like an achievement unlocked moment if you can get it. But regardless, I'm excited to play with a big Baron. We'll see if we get the chance in the series. So as a whole, the deck, like I said, players like Alan ZQ have mastered playing decks like this. In fact, Alan ZQ has said, if I play this deck correctly, he doesn't think he'll ever lose a game. And that speaks to not only his skill as a player, it speaks to the fact that this is not an easy deck to play. And that is what I guess I am most apprehensive about when it comes to playing this. There is a lot of opportunities of choice with something like this. Something like, do I want to move my Hwei in? Do I want to hold up rune energy for a spell on my opponent's turn? Moments of choice that will make the difference between winning a game and losing a game. Decks like this are not easy to play. So what I am hoping is, I'm hoping to get a little bit of experience playing this. Hopefully win a couple games and showcase the power potential that is there. I'm not expecting to win all the games. I never expect to win all the games that I play. But given that this deck is a challenging deck, I'm hoping to do the best I can with it, and we will see how it works out. Regardless, I'm very excited to play a top-tier meta deck like this, and I think the games are going to be very interesting. So, as always, if you like the content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps things out here, and I will see everyone in the next video.